I'm Bill Hemmer. End of another long week here. States from Montana to Maryland lifting more restrictions today as President Trump gives us an update on the race to develop a vaccine. More on that story in a moment here. Meanwhile, there is new fallout from the Michael Flynn matter. Intelligence sources telling Fox News that they're concerned unmasking is being politicized and that could hurt their ability to keep America safe in the future. I want to start there this hour with Leon Panetta, former CIA Director and Defense Secretary under President Obama. Sir, it's good to see you again. It's been about a month. Thank you for coming back here. I want to get your view as to whether or not this can be explained away by those who are talking at the moment, or will the president and his team be proven correct on their allegations?
Well, you know, it is a political season, so you have to wonder whether or not a lot of this is kind of a political diversion when the country is facing the coronavirus. As to whether or not any of this can be established, I mean, part of this is going to be resolved in the courts with Judge Sullivan, and I assume that there is an investigation going on in the Justice Department that will resolve other issues as well. So we'll just have to wait and see.
So Brennan and Clapper were on MSNBC and CNN in the last 24 hours or so. Yeah, they were asked about it, and here was part of that answer here. Give this a listen.
I think our country is in very serious trouble when you have such blatant political corruption at the highest levels of the U.S. government, something I never thought I would see in my lifetime.
It's a routine thing. It's appropriate and legitimate. When you have a valid foreign intelligence target engaging with a U.S. person.
There are more questions forthcoming, and there could have been more questions there at that moment as well. They're going to offer their own explanation over time. What is your explanation for this? What happened?
Well, it's hard to go back and try to figure out all the elements here, but the reality is that obviously General Flynn did go before a court and admit to lying. And you have to ask yourself, if he admitted to lying not once but twice, if he was innocent, why did he do that? So that's one issue that's obviously going to be looked at. As to other issues related to the Russia situation, I mean, the fact is that the Russians in 2016 didn't interfere in our election process. That's been established by all of the intelligence agencies. They did the same thing in 2018, and they're doing the same thing in 2020. So it is an issue that is of concern to the United States.
But you've seen the list of these names. Why would Joe Biden need to know about Michael Flynn a week before leaving office?
Well, I think that goes back to the whole issue of just exactly what was Michael Flynn doing and talking to the Russian ambassador. If he was talking to the Russian ambassador before he became national security advisor and the administration took office, there is a question of whether or not he was trying to interfere with our foreign policy, not having been in office yet. So I think there are some legitimate issues that were asked at the time.
Okay, so one of the issues is who leaked to the media. I mean, eventually that's where it went, and that's a criminal act. Based on your experience, do you believe they know who that person is already?
You mean the person who may have leaked the information?
Or if it was more than one?
I don't know. You know, I remember when I was chief of staff and President Clinton used to ask me to try to check out leaks, and it was always very difficult to find who was leaking to the press. So who knows whether they're able to find exactly who did that. That's a tough issue to try to see whether or not someone in particular gave information to the press. But you know, perhaps they have that information and perhaps they don't.
Some believe, probably likely. Leon Panetta, thank you for your time. You called it a diversion. And given the political season that is 6 months away from an election, do you think Bill Barr is guilty of that? Is that what you're saying?
I just think that at a time when the country is overwhelmed by this crisis, you got 2,000 people dying a day, almost 86,000 dead total, 36 million out of jobs. I think the main focus of the president, I think the main focus of Republicans and Democrats ought to be on how to deal with this major crisis. I know there are a lot of these other political issues and conspiracies that are bouncing around, but I think all of them would do well. And I think the American people would ask them to basically focus on the major problem that's confronting this country, and that's the coronavirus.
It appears both stories will continue, and we'll follow both. Sir, thank you for your time today. Leon Panetta, hunkered down in Monterey, California.